This is MindRaid with the Koch Brothers. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to MindRaid episode 2. I'm here with my brother Eric, and we put out a little bit of a feeler, bro, online for what people wanted to see.
Yeah.
You and I had been talking about and wanted to talk about aliens because we're alien heads. We're space heads. We love the universe, and it's fascinating to us. And we'll talk about that for sure. The overwhelming, resounding interest was in MMA.
Yeah.
Was in that, of course, that's not really a surprise. We love talking about MMA. We love combat sports, but we typically don't talk about it very much outside of the gym and outside of our social circle, and we don't really do much outside of our social circle. We keep everything pretty much that we do inside of the gym. But some of those stories that we've talked about over the years with all the people that we've trained with was that this whole thing is a pretty incredible story. And we've never publicized it that much. We've always been proud of where we came from. But it's a story, I think, that taps into perseverance and willpower and what our gym is really named after, hard drive. And it's a story that is atypical, I think. I think it's a story that we know is intriguing and interesting, to at least to us. Maybe it isn't to anybody else, but
right.
What do you think about that? Do you think our story is special, or do you think that we're not really that special? Because I go back and forth with it, but I'm like, this is crazy.
I think it's special seeing how far it's come.
Yeah.
Where we're at now compared to where we started,
Right.
And even if you look at everybody's goals, when I started training with you in your basement, my goal off the bat wasn't to be in the UFC, be a UFC champion. That wasn't my goal. It was a after school curricular activity, extracurricular, that I wanted to, do just to keep me busy, because I stopped doing taekwondo and I needed something, to work out and put myself towards. And so it's crazy to see, I can take myself back. I can put myself in my shoes when I was a kid and remember thinking exactly what I was thinking at that moment. And now we're here where I'm still competing in the UFC, and I've been in the UFC for 10 years. Well, with Zuffa for 10 years,
Right. WEC before that.
Yeah, WEC before that. But it's crazy to think, training on a 8x8 mat.
Yeah, it was. I don't know what it was. It was. I want to say it was like 9 zebra mats, which were 2x6 or something like that.
Yeah.
But it wasn't much.
Yeah.
But even further back, I think we've talked a lot with, or if we've talked about the basement, a hybrid faction, which we'll get to at some point. But what we're gonna do with this next following podcast is kind of tell people who we really are, where we came from, and what's intriguing to me with you is to go way back when it was just really me and you. Long before any of this MMA business ever started up, you were a martial artist when you were 4.
Yeah.
Right? Is that when you started taekwondo?
Started taekwondo when I was 4.
Tell me your earliest memories of taekwondo. Like, just tell your taekwondo experience, because I think that's pretty significant. And it's easy to go, oh, well, that was just when I was a kid and that was my end. But that was an introduction to a way of thinking, a structured way of thinking. So tell us about your taekwondo experience, at least what you can recall.
I mean, I still remember it. Bright as day. I was a big fan, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That was the thing that was in.
It's still in.
And it's still
the
in.
Ninja Turtles are more awesome now, I think.
Right.
I love the Turtles. And you liked a lot of shit that I didn't really get into.
Power Rangers.
Go Power
Yeah,
Rangers.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I was like, this is the cheesiest shit ever. And I got it, but you loved that shit.
I
and I
loved it.
could not stand
Loved
the
it.
Power Rangers.
Yeah.
We'll talk about your flute at some
Oh
point.
yeah, yeah.
But
Do.
yeah, the what was that flute called?
Uh,
Was it the dragon flute?
I don't know if it's the dragon.
It summoned the dragon Zord
It might.
or some
It was
shit?
because there's the dragon's Zord, right? Was the Zord?
I
that came...
swear we gotta look that up.
Yeah, we'll look it up.
We gotta look it up.
We'll look it up.
Anyways, so you were a really young kid. You got into Taekwondo. Do you remember? Did you want to go into it, or did mom put you in, or how'd that happen?
No, I wanted to get into it. It was something. Yeah, I'd never really thought about it, but I was actually looking through newspaper ads, and I saw a ad for Hughes Institute Taekwondo.
Hughes Institute,
you know,
of Taekwondo.
in the business section, you know, of the
back
the
when
newspaper.
things were on print.
And I ran to mom and dad right away, and I said, I want to do this, and they really didn't fight it. They put me right in there. So
yeah,
I mean that was it. But that was always my I wanted to be a ninja as a kid. Ninjas were the coolest, you know.
Yeah.
Especially those early '90s days, dude. Ninjas were the craze,
dude. They were because like, and here's the funny thing. I gotta say this about ninjas before we go on too far. I've had a lot of people that have talked to me about how they're studying ninjutsu.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, I want to say, I've read some books about ninjutsu. I think maybe they are about, maybe they're just bullshit to make it. But what is ninjutsu? It's, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a martial art form of ninja, or it's of secret assassins.
Yeah.
Right. It's ninja. The traditional ninja, as I understand it, were assassins.
Yeah.
And they were highly skilled, and they were quiet in the whole 9 yards and all that shit. And I don't know all the intricacies of it, but I know that they were secret assassins.
Yeah.
So they probably didn't go around telling people that they were ninjas. So
No.
if I trained in ninjutsu and I was like legit and hardcore about it, you would think I wouldn't tell anybody. I'd just be covert. Like
you would just be
a ninja,
you'd be to
you know
yourself.
But anyways, Power Rangers and Turtles were awesome. They were filled with martial arts. So do you think they were actually potentially instrumental in influencing you in that direction?
Without a doubt. I was obsessed with both those shows.
Yeah,
both those shows. Even the toys, and that goes to the Dragon Zord flute we were talking about. I mean, I didn't want much. I think as a kid I didn't ask for much. I didn't want much, but I do remember that toy. They had this toy, and it was only like $20. But $20 to me as a kid is like
astronomical.
Whoa, you know. And but it was the Green Ranger's little flute, because Green Ranger was my favorite. He'd summon the Dragon Zord out of like the Antarctic, glaciers with his flute, and they were selling that. Well, I remember because Power Rangers were so big, they had like a raffle for one of these flutes.
Yeah.
Through this after school program or whatever, and I would always like enter, and of course I'm not I didn't win it. So I hounded mom and dad. I swear, man, it was probably 4 months for that thing. Like, I wanted it so bad. And when I ended up getting it, I used it like once. Like, I played with it once, and then it was just kind of like...
I remember.
Yeah,
I remember the whole build-up to that damn flute. And you wanted that thing so bad.
Yeah.
And when they got that for you, I remember going, how can that be that interesting?
Right.
It's a hunk of plastic that just goes...
Yeah,
it puts out the same shit every time.
Yeah.
And so... that's exactly what happened. It was almost like you got it in your hands and you hit the buttons and you realized what it really was.
Yeah.
And you were like, fuck this thing.
Yeah.
And but I remember the build up, and isn't it interesting when you're a kid and there's like a drawing for something that you really want or something like that.
Yeah.
And you don't get it. It like hurts.
Oh man, it messes
it's
with
such
you.
it lets you down so bad.
Yeah.
It hurts, and now you're like,
because you pump yourself up as if
the miracle could happen.
When you get older, you realize the chances. You're like, I ain't getting this.
I don't know. I feel like we've had a tough road, but man, we've been really blessed.
Oh yeah.
And there's still stuff like every day, like my business partner and our buddy Brent, he knew that I wanted this Glock, this new weapon. And so he plotted and schemed a way to figure it out and do it. And he bought it from our buddy Ernie at shout out to Cedar Valley Outfitters, good people. And he got this Generation 5 Glock, and who does that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I have the opportunity to go to Israel pretty soon.
That's cool too.
I'm gonna. That's gonna be a crazy podcast.
Yeah, that'll be cool.
Just having all the footage and the shit.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel like the life that we're living, and I feel like you and I crafted it to some point, like intentionally.
Yeah.
Is so rewarding.
Yeah.
And it's not as easy as people think. And people think some of the silliest shit about you and I, and how much money we have, how rich we are and shit. But it's definitely been an interesting trip. And I remember the Power Rangers. I remember Hughes Institute of Taekwondo, and I remember that you were kind of a standout.
Yeah.
You can kind of toot your own horn because at that point in time, maybe I'm biased, but you were tearing shit up, and there were people in that gym that were like, "How old's this kid?"
Yeah.
So talk about like what you liked about Taekwondo, what you still have with you, because I know you still have some of it, and how that began your journey, I guess, in martial arts.
I was just a natural. It just, I naturally was really flexible. Yeah. So, it just made, as soon as I went in there and started stretching, man, I'm doing full splits, and I'm dropping down.
So and when you say that, I watched you do that, and this is what happened. Me and Mom were sitting one day, and I liked watching you practice. I thought it was so fucking dope. My little brother was doing this shit, and Master Hughes or Instructor Hughes was in there, and you ran out onto this wood floor. And it's oak.
Yeah.
It's just polished wood floor.
Yeah.
And you went, and Hughes was standing off to the side, and you ran out right onto the floor and just dropped dead hips to a straight up split.
Yeah.
Like fully split.
Yeah.
Not slow warm up.
Like bam.
Boom.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you hit the floor, and Hughes turned and looked at us.
Yeah.
And he was like, I can't do that shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you got to break boards and all kinds of shit.
Oh yeah.
What was your favorite kick?
My favorite kick, I love flying side kick.
The flying side kick.
Flying side kick. Yeah, just being flexible, being natural at it. It was just it came really easy. The movements came really easy. The only things I didn't, I wasn't a fan of. I was very competitive, but I didn't like forms.
Why not?
Just because as a kid, my attention span, I didn't want to study. You know, I wanted to learn when I was in class, but I didn't want to have to do homework, like book homework on forms. Yeah. And so I think that's one of them, just because my attention span's always been, kind of there. But I love sparring. I love sparring and breaking boards, You
always did.
Yeah, breaking boards I started breaking boards. That was the most fun. But then the older I got, I knew sparring was the applicable fight, right? So that was
needed to prove yourself.
Right. And that became, what I like to do. But yeah, I mean, I stood out. We had some good people in there.
No, there were good people. I remember there was really good people in that gym, and the program was consistent.
Yeah, it was.
I remember in consideration of boards, and one of the best breaks I've seen anybody ever do was when you were a kid. I don't know how old you were, but you weren't that old.
Yeah.
And there was a demonstration where Mr. Hughes was asking you to do something that I'm not sure you had even done.
Yeah.
And it was jumping over the backs of 4 people on their hands and knees.
Yeah.
And blowing through 4 boards.
Yeah.
And 4 boards back then, a board is not hard to break.
Right.
If you commit to, as an adult person, hitting something correctly and training correctly and hitting it, you go right through the damn thing.
Right.
But 4 boards is a different thing altogether.
Yeah.
Especially for a child.
Yeah.
To blow through those things. And you cleared those those people easily, and you smashed through that board. And
mean,
there's a lot of people that choke in those moments.
I'm trying to think how old.
Probably 10 or 11.
Yeah.
I don't think you were 12 or 13 because I think that was about the age when you kind of backed off of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah,
that.
I think so. Yeah.
So talk about sparring and what was cool about it and what the limitations were.
Sparring, well, it's just sparring was the true
test
competition. You know, forms you're competing against people, but you're going separately, right? It's not a fight.
Yeah.
Even as a kid, I knew that like this isn't applicable. You know,
applicability too.
Right.
Forms. A lot of forms are. There might be some things that are applicable in the smallest circumstances.
Yeah.
But they're not. Some of it's just bullshit.
Yeah.
And you're in what you're doing, and we've always maintained this, and a lot of this came from Bruce Lee, I think, as well. Why do that when you can train actual attributes and skills that are high percentage that work an often amount of time? It just didn't make a lot of sense to me. But sparring, you thrived in that environment.
Yep. Yeah, and that's I mean, once I got really competitive in sparring, that was like my focus. Even board breaking. I think the last couple tournaments I did, I didn't do forms. I didn't board break.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I was so bad at forms, but Mr. Hughes couldn't not belt me because
you're
tearing everybody else up.
Yeah.
You know, so it looks bad.
You were a star pupil.
Yeah. So, once I started sparring, that was it, man. I just wanted to spar, and
that you did.
Yeah. And after I was done with Taekwondo, I want to say it's about 2 or 3 years until I started training.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yep.
And I didn't do much then, but definitely when I started coming in the basement and training, and I'll never forget the first time, because we would always pummel, right?
Yeah.
Even just around the house, just joking around, pummeling for double underhooks.
Remember when I know you remember when I'd punch you in the wrist?
Oh, yeah.
You'd put up your hands.
Yeah, Keoni used to punch me in the wrist and piss me off.
He'd put his hands up, and I would punch him right in the wrist. And it wouldn't be the face. Funny. You remember that shit?
Yeah,
that was so fucking
that's funny, man. Yeah, that's crazy. I forgot all about that. But yeah, when I first came down, I actually think it was Thanksgiving. I think it was Thanksgiving, and it was one of Tish's brothers. Was it Patrick, maybe?
Yeah, she has a brother, Patrick. Yeah.
No, I'm not.
John's the taller one.
But he's like, "Hey, you want to box?" And I was like, I hadn't done a combat sport in like 2-3 years.
Yeah.
And I did Taekwondo. I never boxed. But I'm like, sure. And I put the boxing gloves on, just deuce, just jabbing.
Yeah.
And then after that, Debo's like, man, maybe your brother should come train with us. Because at the time, when you were training in the basement, I think it was just you and Debo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So Debo's like, oh, you should have your brother start coming and train with us. And then when I did come for the actual first week of training, I don't think I took a day off.
Oh, and you know what? I totally forgot about that. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Who are you sparring then? Who does it that you said you were sparring that first day? You were lighting him up. Oh,
Tish's brother, Patrick,
or John, or one of those two.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember?
And now that you say that, I remember Debo going, "Whoa,
yeah,
you need to get this kid in here."
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a trip.
Yeah.
So Taekwondo was kind of the basis for your martial arts experience, and a shout out to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
And Biggie's a big turtle fan.
Yep, Biggie
if I
is
recall.
too.
Yeah.
And his name's Michael, so Michelangelo.
Boom.
Yeah.
So here's my thing. I was talking to this is kind of my story. When mom and dad were younger, they had me. They were moving all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
So I never had what I would consider a long-term stable home.
Right.
I had a place to live, and I had food, and mom and dad took care of me, but we moved a lot.
Yeah.
And had all of these different types of, apartments. We lived in a mobile home and all this different stuff. But I never had the opportunity to develop long-running relationships. And about the time that I would meet these friends that would like become really close to me in about, 9 to 12 months, I'd be moving somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I would live in different places and meet these people and befriend these people and leave. And it like really hurt my feelings, right?
Yeah.
And I never got to establish these long-term relationships, so I just stopped trying.
Yeah.
And I became kind of a massive introvert because of it at a very young age. And I recently talked to somebody about this, and I was talking about how I've recently considered myself. I'd admitted to myself that I was a coward when I was a kid. And somebody asks me, this counselor that's doing an analysis on me, proactive, it goes, well, it's interesting that you called yourself a coward because that's like a shaming thing.
Yeah.
You're trying to like cast shame upon somebody if you call them a coward. But what was more true is you had social anxiety. You had a bunch of social anxiety and all this shit, and you were really painfully shy and all this stuff. But what this did, not having connections to people, not feeling included in shit. Like I wanted to play sports, but by the time I started meeting people and like forming social connections with people, then I was like so afraid of letting people down.
Yeah.
That I loved sports. I loved football. I loved baseball. I loved all this shit, but I didn't want to play it because I didn't want to fail.
Yeah.
I didn't want to let my team down because I hadn't like practiced enough or whatever.
Right.
It was all insecurity. All of it was based in insecurity. But it was such a painful experience, like on my own.
Yeah.
Going through my younger years in teenage, like early teens, and I'd conquered all of my normal fears, like fear of the dark and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't take invitations to go to 5th grade birthday parties because I didn't want to even have an opportunity to be humiliated in some way. Right. I had that level of anxiety all the time, and it made me so fucking mad.
Yeah.
And it was so frustrating. I felt like I lived in a kind of a prison, and I wanted to like have connection and a happy life, but I was certain that my life was doomed. And I've told you this before. I've told a lot of people this. At that point in my life, when I was a early teen, I thought that I was going to be in prison, in the military, or in some kind of bad situation and end up dead at an early age. I had no real hope for myself at all because I thought I was going to be an introvert. So this pissed me off.
Yeah.
And I eventually, I got tired of it, but the whole thing for me was sparked when Dad told me about Bruce Lee.
Yeah. And
we were going to Grandma and Grandpa's house up in Lamont. Yeah. And he goes, man, I don't remember exactly what I said, but I was very young when this happened. And he goes, man, there's this guy from China. His name's Bruce Lee. And when he moves, he's so fast.
Yeah.
You can't even see it. You physically can't. It's like a blur. And I'm like, come on.
Right.
I'm like, Dad, are you Josh? He's like, Dad's like, size doesn't matter. This guy is tiny and he's so fast. Nobody can touch him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, look at dude, I'm getting goosebumps right now just thinking about that shit. I go, whatever. So he's like, I'll show you. And so I'm thinking there's a camera trick or something.
Yeah.
That he's talking about. And he goes out and he rents Enter the Dragon. He puts this on, and I watch Bruce Lee, and I'm like not sold at all right away because I've never seen Bruce Lee. Yeah. And then I see Bruce Lee and Bob Wall square off in the scene where they're hand to hand. Mm-hmm. And Bob Wall is an amazing martial artist. They had a bunch of amazing martial artists in that movie, but Bruce Lee was the centerpiece.
Yeah.
And he moved so fast. And I could tell, like, this was the 70s. They didn't have like CGI or something. You couldn't see him.
Yeah.
I couldn't track with my eye or that whatever film they were using.
Right.
His emotion. Fist. It was a blur.
Yeah.
And I was like, whoa, this guy is on another level.
Yeah.
And something about him seemed so true. Like he had earned this somehow.
Right.
Through an amazing amount of discipline and diligence. And so Bruce Lee was the first time that I was like, this could give me a sense of personal power.
Yeah.
This could get me right into a positive line of thinking and in a more positive mindset. It gave hope to the little guy. So I became fascinated with that and started reading everything I could get. And I started with thankfully, I'm still thankful to this day that I started martial arts reading The Tao of Jeet Kune Do by Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
Which is basically a loose scribbling of philosophy and skill by Bruce.
It's philosophy more than
it is, but it's so fucking money.
It is, because I remember in high school reading it.
Yeah.
In class, and I expected, I wanted like moves, or it was all philosophy.
Yeah, what one expects when they open up this book by Bruce Lee is a system.
A, B, yeah.
Yeah, this is a jab. This is a cross. And he has a series that's dedicated to like specific skills that he believed in his style.
Yeah.
But the Tao was a philosophy book with his scribblings in it. And I read through it, and at first I was like, I don't know if I like this format. Maybe I get these other books. And then I went back and read it again, and I'm like, this is some kind of masterworks.
Yeah.
Because it's a philosophy. This isn't like a specific set of his instructions. What he's saying is that you can express yourself at your highest medium, and you are the art itself. You want to find what's most effective because it's combat. If you don't, you're going to get iced.
Right.
You don't want to waste time with shit. You want to use what works. I get it. But your own expression of that's Jeet Kune Do.
Right.
The way of no way, essentially. Mm-hmm. You're going to take this blend and make it your own and discard what doesn't work for your specific body type, genetics, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And what's weird about it is it had such a powerful effect back then. There was a split in the martial arts community, specifically the Jeet Kune Do community. In the Jeet Kune Do community after Bruce Lee's death, half of them were like, Jeet Kune Do is a philosophy. It's not kung fu mixed with this and this. It's not exactly what Bruce did. Bruce said that himself. He said that this is a philosophy. And people were like, oh, no, we have to study the arts that Bruce did. And it's like, no, you don't get this whole thing.
Right.
Bruce was way ahead of his time, and arguably
the first mixed martial arts.
Exactly. Or the first, at least, modern mixed martial artist. Yeah. Back then, martial arts was a lot of bullshit.
Yeah.
Talk about that bullshit back then from your perspective, what martial arts was before the UFC, before MMA, because I watched very closely, and I have some experiences that proved it was bullshit, and the foot fist way.
Right.
The Kenny Powers instructor, talk about it.
The way I think about it is martial arts isn't a sport. Martial arts is like, it's a very old way, a very old fighting system, right? But it's, to defend yourself, or what armies would use to train their soldiers.
Right.
Way back in the day, right?
Martial being war.
Right.
Yeah,
and
war art.
Just like anything that humans do, if it's around for a long time, and this goes into religion with the Bible. Right?
Yep.
Things change. Things get watered down.
Interpreted,
right? And then when you start bringing money in, and that's what happened with Taekwondo, Taekwondo, like, if you go to, like, the legit places in Korea, those guys don't fucking play.
Right.
Like, they're bad motherfuckers.
They'll knock you the fuck
right.
out.
They will fuck you up,
Yep.
But
don't,
then you
catch yourself slipping on tornado kicks, bro.
Yeah. And you come here, man, you got like 4th degree black belts that are like 250 pounds all fat.
Yeah, can't even high kick.
Right,
literally can't high kick.
It's paid. It's
Yeah.
It's a money scheme. It's a money system.
And quasi cultish.
Right. So, and even when I did Taekwondo, I mean, and it was the same way in a sense, but I had natural ability. I was young. I could actually apply. But that's not the case. With everybody.
Yeah.
But the way I look at it, especially when we compare it to what MMA is now today, MMA is a sport.
Yeah.
So martial arts back in the day, it was system. What system? What system is the best, right?
Yep.
And that I mean, the proof's in the pudding. That's what the first UFCs were.
Yeah.
The first UFCs were no joke like Street Fighter.
Yeah.
You got a karate guy here. You got a sumo wrestler.
Judo and sumo.
Yeah,
is what they said.
Judo and sumo.
This guy's bringing in judo and sumo is what they said.
So, and it's crazy to see that happen, because I don't think there wasn't a platform in which you knew what martial art was the best.
No, and everybody wondered it. And the thing was, they were all full of shit.
Yeah.
Because they were all like, oh, I know how to defeat every style. Well, that's bullshit.
Yeah.
Everybody knows that if you have the only answer, you're a fucking liar,
Yeah.
right? I mean, absolution is rarely the case in anything.
Right.
But back then you had these guys, and I'm not going to name any names or call anybody out, but I did Taekwondo for approximately 2 days. And
2 days.
My thought was, this was actually after I had seen UFC.
Yeah.
I'll talk about that and we'll get to that. But I joined and I went, okay, there's nothing in the Cedar Rapids area except for Taekwondo. For the people that don't know, back in the day, there was nothing here. Mm-hmm. There was Taekwondo. There might have been some small boxing club of very little regard. But beyond that, there was no like Muay Thai. There was no Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu to be heard of. The benefit of Iowa is there's some scrappers and wrestlers around. Yeah. But that's about it. At the time, the only Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu was on the coasts that I'm aware of. Was in the big areas like LA, New York, Hanzo School, all that stuff. There was nothing here. So I was like, I'm going to start Taekwondo and I'll work on my kicks. And I've read Bruce Lee's book. I know that this is a piece. Right? Yeah. I can fit this piece, the attributes, flexibility, the dexterity, the kick placement, accuracy, all that shit, into a well-rounded game, just like Bruce said. Yeah. So I start Taekwondo. I do Taekwondo for 2 days. And I'm like, okay, this is good. My shit's worn out. My hips are jacked up. Like, I can see how this could make me an amazing kicker. Yeah. And I approach the instructor very humbly, and I say, hey, I've read Bruce Lee's book. I'm a big fan of him. And I was wondering if maybe we could get a grappling seminar in here to well-round our skills for self-defense purposes. Yeah. So we're well-rounded martial artists. And the first thing he said almost right away in this panic was, oh, I can show you some stuff to keep it off the ground. And I went in my mind, it's like, no, you can't. Yeah. Yeah, I've watched you train people for a long time, and you don't know shit about that. You're lying to me now, and you're nervous. And so he goes, well, I do have this grappling tape by this guy, Joe Lewis, Joe Lewis is a martial arts legend. He knew Bruce, and he knew all those guys. And he had a martial or a self-defense tape with Michael D. Pasquale Jr., who's a judo guy, I believe, or a jiu-jitsu guy. They're great martial artists, and the material was actually decent material too. They showed real, legit Kyokushin and Muay Thai kicks and all this stuff. But when I asked him about potentially hosting a seminar with the Gracies, who I was enamored with at the time because of Hoist. Hoist was another world mover and game changer, and we'll talk about him at some point too. But I'd already seen this, and I asked this instructor if he'd think about having the Gracies over, and he goes, well, I heard they're like really overpriced, and somebody else told me they were kind of arrogant too. And I went, you don't know the Gracies. Yeah, you don't know anything. You never met the Gracies a single time. Yeah. Like your insecurity is spilling out of you. That was the day that I was done with Taekwondo. Yeah. And that's unfortunate because Taekwondo would have been good for me. Yeah. Just like it'd be good for a lot of Wonder Boy. You started your career there. Anthony Showtime Pettis started in Taekwondo. Yep. And a lot of the wins that you guys have can be attributed to some of the attributes that you got in Taekwondo. For sure. But I wasn't really bought in, and at the time there was no school, so I went, I need to go get as much information as I could. I'd get Black Belt magazine. Yeah. And they'd have this whole spread of all the latest video series, and they had the craziest shit. They had like monkey fist kung fu and ninjutsu. That. You remember all that shit? I remember. And this was right when DVDs kind of came out, so you could get VHS or DVD sets. And the one that I really wanted so bad was the Gracie Black Belt series. Yeah. And I don't even know what was all on it, but it was like, this is what you could equivalently use for Black Belt, and I don't even know if that was the case. Yeah. But since Hoist had torn through everybody, and I knew that jiu-jitsu was something that I needed to know for, the well-rounded game, I wanted to buy this shit. And of course, it was really expensive. Mom and Dad never did. Yeah. But I would go get whatever I could to study on my own. And literally the resource that I used at that time, because there was nothing else in Cedar Rapids, was the public library. Yeah. So I would go there and get those. I would beg Mom and Dad to buy me videos so I could learn shit. They bought me a Frank Cucci Navy SEAL Special Warfare Combat. I got that shit still somewhere else. That was the first place that I learned Americanas and Kimuras, was in a little pamphlet in his book. And I had to piece all this shit together through books and basically training on my own, which, if you're training on your own, you're grappling, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
If you're striking, you can hit a bag and pretend like you know what you're doing.
Right.
But if you're learning grappling, you need a willing body. And so I would try these moves on friends when they would allow me the opportunity. And very quickly they would start denying me the opportunity to even try.
Yeah.
I got good enough that I could take care of myself. And as you know, not many people want to do this. So when you try to convince somebody to do some shit like this and they're constantly getting beat all the time, they'll oftentimes just bail out and go, oh, I'm never going to get better at this, and quit.
Right.
And so I had a hard time finding anybody to train with. And a lot of it was just on the bag, and it was just theory, and it was study and whatever I could get to self-educate myself, because there was no other option. But there was that fateful day. Dad took me into the, after I studied Bruce Lee and I'm reading all these books, before the Taekwondo incident, Dad takes me to Blockbuster. I'm walking through the special interest section, and at that point in time, it was still VHS in the big, thick plastic boxes.
Yep.
And I see this guy.
Yeah.
Or whatever the big atrocious cartoon logo.
He's like a big almost looks like Silver Surfer.
Yeah. They brought him back recently, which was dope.
That's dope.
I love that. I love that throwback.
Yeah, I love that logo.
But I see this and I'm like, what is that? And I wonder if it's a movie that somebody's put in the wrong place. But I start looking at it and it's like, oh, it's a battle of styles and blah blah blah. And I'm like, this is a Van Damme movie.
Yeah, right.
It's got to be one of the 18 Jean-Claude Van Damme movies that he's made about a special tournament. And shout out to Van Damme. Yeah. He's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And I love every single one of those.
Another
movies.
big fan.
Yeah, I love those movies. And, Universal Soldier, watched it like a cajillion times.
I could still watch it.
I could Cop, whatever, right?
Yeah.
But I don't even know what the hell I was talking about. Now I'm so enamored with Van Damme.
The UFC, the box.
Yeah, so I'm thinking I'm looking at the Quest 2, right? Or some shit.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I'm looking at these pictures, and one of them is who was the guy that knocked out Taylor Tuli's tooth, the kickboxer, Gerard Gordeau.
Okay.
That right?
Yeah.
There's a picture of him, and there's a picture of Hoist, and there's a picture of a couple of these people, and I'm like, this isn't a movie.
This is real.
This is a tournament. And I start reading it, and my heart starts.
Yeah.
Like, I'm going, this is the shit they've been making movies about for years. It's real. This is happening. Now we get proof of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I'm like, Dad, you got to let me get this. And he does. And I go home, dude, and I'm watching this, and it blew my mind.
Yeah.
It blew my It was a life-changing moment.
I remember watching it. And it was, yeah, it was just.
So if you are just being put on Earth now and you've never watched MMA or don't know anything about it, at this point in time, we had this watered-down martial arts in the United States. All the nerds in the world. Energy blasting each other and convincing each other of all of this shit that is straight brainwash.
Bullshit.
If you believe this, you're a moron. I'm sorry. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
But it was total bullshit, and everybody was inquisitive about what is the actual best style. So you have this tournament with all of these world-renowned experts, everybody from 10th degree black belts in karate to some dude.
Yeah.
Or a cop that was a ninja, apparently.
Yeah.
And Steve Jenham, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it was crazy. It was kind of a circus, but you had all these people, and you didn't know who was going to win. You didn't know if the karate guy was going to literally chop somebody in half. Like, this is a 10th degree black belt. Nobody knows what the hell is going to happen.
Yeah.
And the second big inspiration for me that jumped into my life in martial arts, inspired me to just go all in, was Hoist Gracie.
Yeah.
Because two reasons. One, he was exactly what the Gracies had hoped he would be. He was slender in stature, very unassuming. You would have never thought that this would be the guy.
Small compared to everybody.
But when he goes in there and he chews through everybody with jiu-jitsu and takes advantage of people's inability to deal with the ground, all of the sudden the psyche of people, or people's psyche or thoughts about combat, are completely obliterated.
Mm-hmm.
For years, when I was a kid growing up, Mike Tyson was the scariest motherfucker in the world.
Right.
And now he still is.
Yeah, he's still bad.
He's still a bad man.
Yeah.
But back in that point in time, boxing reigned supreme.
That was fighting.
It was the baddest man on the planet. They called Mike the baddest man on the planet because, to everybody's assumption, the heavyweight boxer of the world, because of the spectacle, the sight that boxing had been for so many years, was the baddest man on the planet. Grapplers knew that not to be the case.
Right.
Grapplers knew, even wrestlers knew at that point in time long ago, that if you put a striker on his back, he ain't doing shit.
Yeah.
You know, that's not to say that grappling is going to beat striking in every engagement, but what Hoist proved is, if you don't land that first punch, if you don't knock me out with the very first strike, and I get a hold of you and I close you down, and you don't know what you're doing, you're helpless.
Yeah.
It's an anaconda situation. But the thing that killed it for me with Hoist is that he was so small.
Yeah.
And he overcame some adversity, and he took these big scary guys that were all inflated and all full of muscle, and he tapped them out. People like Ken Shamrock.
Yeah.
And you go, all of a sudden, all my preconceived notions about badassery are disintegrating right in front of my eyes. This unassuming Brazilian is just tearing through people. Now, this was the early days, right?
Yeah.
This was when people were very ignorant to the art of jiu-jitsu, but Hoist's presence proved that jiu-jitsu was necessary, or you at least had to have a fundamental knowledge of mechanics on the ground, or you were going to get fucked up by somebody who had better understanding of mechanics.
Right.
Yeah. And it really inspired me to want to learn this art of jiu-jitsu, and so I went looking for everything I could, and all I really had was videos of Hoist that I would watch over and over and over, and go, hey, my friend Chris, hey, come over, Chris, can I try this arm bar on you? And when I thought I figured out arm bars, I'm still figuring out arm bars.
Yeah.
But when I thought I figured out arm bars, I was so impressed by it, and I just needed more and more and more. And that started this big chain reaction of wanting to learn and self-training. But there was nobody here.
Yeah.
There was no jiu-jitsu here, Hoist. There was no Gracie Academy around for miles. There was nothing here. And so when we were young, you had Taekwondo, and until I was about 12, which is when you would have been 4, I was this super, super insecure, shy kid that was in a super dark place that nobody really knew about because I felt so withdrawn. That drove me to want to become the complete opposite.
Yeah.
It drove me to want to become somebody who could walk down the street confidently and know I could handle my business. I never had that confidence before. And martial arts started giving that to me. So I ended up moving out when I was 17, right? And you were pissed off at me for that for a while because, we were really close.
Yeah.
And I just kind of moved out on Mother's Day.
Yeah, I know. I remember that day.
That was so brutal, man.
Yeah,
Mom was so pissed off at me, and she should be. I was a dick. But, I was a big, strong man. I needed to get out on my own, apparently. And then I ended up eating popcorn and shit for dinner.
Yeah.
But I moved out, and when I moved out, I had really nowhere to train except for in James's apartment. There's not much going on there. And I started teaching this guy, Kurt Marble, what I knew. He was a guy up there. We were snake enthusiasts. We had reptiles. Me, Jeremy Douglas, Jared Douglas, and Kurt Marble. We loved snakes, went snake hunting. We were fucking crazy kids. And I told Kurt about the UFC. I'm like, bro, have you seen this UFC shit? This stuff is awesome. He's like, no, what are you talking about? And I think he got like an Ultimate New Year's. You remember when they used to do that?
What is it?
Ultimate New Year's Eve. So the UFC back in the day, they used to do Ultimate New Year's Eve where they would play like all the events in a row. Yeah. And you could watch them all day, and it was the shit. Yeah. And so he got that, and he was instantly obsessed with the shit. So we're like, we're gonna start training. We started training there, and this was when I actually got into like MMA, like training MMA, and trying to get better at striking and actually sparring and stuff. But for me, when I really got serious about it was in the wrestling room in Belle Plaine when I moved there. And I would get an actual wrestling room to practice these moves on, which was wild. Yeah. especially to have all of that mat space. And I got to try these moves. And Belle Plaine had some really good wrestlers. One of the guys I was hanging out with, Kevin Karofsky, he used to fight, and he's a total stud, state champ for Belle Plaine.
Yeah.
Andy, he ended up going to war, serving his country as well. And shout out to Kevin. I miss that kid. Not a kid anymore, I guess. But Kevin was, when I was lifting weights, I was kind of husky back then. I was like 185 pounds, and I was lifting heavy, and I was deadlifting like 425, and I was really impressed with myself. I wasn't a dick, but Kevin was like, man, he's like this kid. He's like, I wish I could lift that much weight. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a strong guy. And I was like, hey, do you want to roll? Do you want to go in the other room and get a couple rolls in? Because I never get to roll. You're a wrestler, and I can teach you some shit. Yeah. And if I can teach you some shit, we can start training together. He's like, yeah. And so we go in there, and I'm thinking I'm just going to have my way with this kid. Yeah. Well, I ended up catching him a couple times, but he threw me all over the fucking room.
Taking you down.
He was all over me. I'm like, you're like a kid. You're a tiny little baby. Yeah. And you're chucking me all over. He had this mat strength because he was a really high level wrestler. And I was like, okay, shit, I'm going to have to catch you in something. Yeah. And that's when I started my first real intense rolls in actual sparring. But when me and Kurt Marble sparred for the very first time, we sparred at his house, and his house was a total shithole party house, farmhouse out in the middle of off Blairstown. Yeah. There was a hole in the kitchen floor that had duct tape over it that he instructed me not to go near. This is how fucking shitty this house was. There was mold growing under the ottoman because so much beer. Dude, it was rough. And we were grappling on the carpet, bro. And the carpet was that industrial shit. So this moldy ass carpet, I'm grinding my bloody elbows and knees into. It was legit. Infection. It was. That's why I don't get staph, because I trained on Kurt Marble's carpet. Yeah,
you're immune now.
Don't sue me, Kurt. It was a good time. It was a party house. Kurt's a refined man now, but we would grapple on this carpet and get all tore up all the time. But it was all we had. If we weren't grappling on carpet, we were grappling out in the grass. And there was like sticky weeds and shit out there. Mm-hmm. So if you got taken down and you rolled on one of those things, it was horrible. Yeah. The first time we sparred, though, we didn't have any money. I mean, we were broke as hell. Yeah. And he's like, oh, I got this pair of gloves for my cousin or some shit. I don't even remember. He had one pair of gloves. Luckily, I'm a southpaw, and he's a orthodox. So we both put one on each of our leads.
And you're just going.
And we're just jabbing the shit out of each other in his kitchen. Yeah. Because that's where we decided it would be a good idea to spar. In the same place as this taped up hole, cabinets all over the place. And that's, the thing is, I think back to that now, and people are like, that's crazy. I'm like, that's crazy. It's passion. Yeah. If you're passionate about something, you'll do whatever the fuck it takes to do what you got to do. That's right. And so we did what it took. We didn't have the money to do it, but we went, well, we don't got two, but we work on our jab. And then we can switch gloves and we can work on our straights. We did what we had to do because we loved doing what we did. Mm-hmm. So we trained there, and Kurt had a chicken shack, and I'm not, this isn't a name of an outside building he built. This is a chicken shack. Right. And he puts all these really shitty old mats that he bought from some school, and they grapple in there. Yeah. Well, Kurt would end up going to Omaha. And we used to train in this another place we trained with this dude, Tom Book, was this old barn that had his mat in it that he would work with his son on. So we would go there, even dead of winter. It'd be like 35, 40 degrees, no bullshit. Me and Kurt would be out there in 2 layers of sweats grappling for like an hour. Damn. Well, Tom eventually said, hey man, I talked to my lawyer or something, and for liability reasons, I really can't have you guys just coming out here and grappling on this stuff and whatever. And I remember thinking, I don't believe you. Yeah. I think you just don't want us out here for whatever reason. Yeah. And I respect that. It's your property. It's cool. Right. And I'm annoyed by it. But someday, I'm going to be so thankful that you kicked us out of here. Mm-hmm. I remember thinking that when I left. Because Tom was a good dude. He gave me work, and his family was always amazing to me. And he's just a really good guy. Yeah, yeah. And so I knew that if he was telling me this and having this conversation, it was uncomfortable to him in some way. So I was like, whatever. It's no worries. Thank you. And I was like, I know I'm going to thank this fucking guy someday. He's going to push me by annoying me to make me better myself or whatever. So we trained in all of these crazy, deplorable situations because we absolutely loved it. Kurt ends up going to Omaha. I don't train with him for like 3 months or 4 months or something. He's living with his cousin, and he's fighting every couple weeks, I guess, in a bar. Back then, it was all unregulated. Yeah. So you'd fight in a bar against whoever
was there.
Wild West, straight up Wild West MMA. at this point in time, we had also started frequenting these local MMA events. And when I say local, it's not what people think now. The first MMA event I ever attended was in a National Guard armory, and it was in a room, like a big giant, I don't know, convention room. There was like 30 dudes there, and 15 or 16 of them had signed up to fight each other. And they took on a giant concrete floor, they put folding tables down, and they weren't standing up. They were like broke down.
Right.
So they were like this, but it was like, why put those down?
Yeah.
It's all solid.
Right.
Then they put 2 or 3 real thick military tents or tarps or tops of, and these guys beat the shit out of each other on this. There was a kid that was like just turned 18 fighting in this against a guy that was like 30, and this guy that's 30 is like elbowing this dude in the head.
Just beating the shit.
But he's elbowing him in the head while the dude's head is on that thing.
Yeah.
And that thing's sitting on concrete. So you hear this thud, and it's the dude's skull.
Yeah.
And this stuff isn't regulated at all. These people just signed up to do this shit for free. And so that was the moment when I was like, well, maybe MMA isn't the right place for me to compete yet. But this is the way it was back then. It was the fucking Wild West.
It was, yeah.
It was all unregulated. It was kind of a freak show. And we trained with whoever we could. Well, I started training with the Douglas brothers, good friends of mine from Belle Plaine. I was training with Kevin Karofsky. This guy, Josh Stamp, was another really good heavyweight there. And so we compiled this super, super cheesy team named Team Pain.
Team Pain. I remember those shirts.
And it's like...
Team Pain.
Because we love pain. so cliche.
Taking and giving.
It's so cheesy. It's freaking ridiculous. But anyways, it was our team. We were proud of it. And one of the people on that team, and this team wasn't really a hardcore team training every week so much as a collective of local guys that supported this type of thing, was Dave Scherzer.
Yeah.
And Dave and John Strawn had been kind of making waves in the local area in fights because they were just like buzzsaws. They were chewing through everybody. Me and Dave met at a Blairstown Brawl event like way back in the day. And he saw me talking to somebody about leg locks or something like that. And I had seen him compete. And we just naturally, as martial artists, were kind of drawn to each other because we respected what we saw of each other.
Right.
And so we had kind of a collaboration of effort, Dave and I did, going way, way, way back. Yeah. Before Hybrid Faction, before any of that stuff happened. And so that's kind of cool. It's kind of cool to have that relationship that goes. That's from the very, very beginning. Yeah. But I got to see some of these local events, and you had guys signing up to fight that were shit-faced drunk. Mm-hmm. You had guys signing waivers to fight literally after drinking 3 to 4 beers in the audience. They showed up to watch fights. Yeah. And then they drank, and then they signed up to conduct fights. Mm-hmm. And it was a total disaster. There was one, I'm not going to say the promoter's name because he's still snaking around, but he knowingly watched a mentally handicapped man sign up to fight, let him go in and fight. Dude got beat up. Yeah. And then I went up and consoled him at the end of the event because he was sitting in the back corner of the venue crying, saying that he wanted his mommy. Wow. And I was like, you motherfuckers. Yeah, you let this guy, you sat right in front of this guy and you handed him a waiver. You're a piece of shit. Yeah. Wow, dude. You know, and one of the people involved in that was this really well-known dude in Iowa at the time, and you know, I'm not going to validate any of this bullshit or any of these names, but people know he has a substantial number of fights, and he was helping this promoter at the time, and they knew. Yeah. And like they just looked past it. I was like, dude. Yeah, that's the type of shit that's gonna fucking kill this sport. Yeah, is people like you doing scandalous, shady shit like that. Yeah. This promoter was doing really shady shit up until just recently. Probably still is doing shady shit. Yeah. But this was back when shit wasn't even regulated. You couldn't even pretend. You know what I mean? Right. Now you at least have to answer to somebody, but back then there was nothing. Nothing. Yeah. And a lot of the rules, like who knew? Yeah. What the rules even were, and a lot of the rules weren't really enforced. Do you remember going to, Boulware versus Christian when Devin fought Nick Bolaware, and Devin armbarred him 3 times. Yeah, the barn. When he subbed him? He subbed him 3 times. He armbarred him 3 times, fucked his arm all up. Bolaware tapped, and the ref just let it keep going because he's a local guy. We were about ready to take on everybody in the whole fucking place. Yeah, that's crazy. But So yeah, it was back then. It was I was training with who I could train with, and I ended up, after I moved back to Cedar Rapids, I met a dude, Jeremy Morris, who's another really good friend of mine, and he trained with me a lot. And about that time, they were having fights at Third Street Live, and MMA was getting a little bit more popular, but not popular enough to sustain like local shows or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so this bar, Third Street Live, started having grappling competitions and MMA fights on Tuesday night fights. And so I ran into Dave there and John was fighting in fucking jean shorts, bro.
Yeah,
the notorious jean shorts.
Yeah.
And just beating people's ass, just motoring on people. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But me and Jeremy did a couple grappling matches there. Do you remember me telling you about the time I got slammed in the triangle? That was there.
Yep.
So I do this grappling match against, I'm like, I sign up, I don't know who the dude is. And he gets, I think he's a cameraman or some shit.
Right.
But he shows up and he takes off his shirt, and this dude's like 6'2" and just jacked as fuck.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know. This dude looks like a wrestler. Like, he might be a fucking handful. I'm not that big.
Yeah.
So he shoots in, and I get him in this guillotine choke, and I'm like, okay, I got this. No problem.
Yeah.
He gets out. And, like, I was buried in it hard.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, shit, this isn't good. I immediately go to a triangle choke and lock it up tight, and I underhook his leg. And for whatever reason, I let go of his leg, and I go back to double on the head, and I pull down.
That's when he lifted.
And that was right when he lifted. He gave me everything that he had, and he got me off the floor. And I remember in a fully sunk triangle, like 6'2" off the, actually higher than that, because it's my torso, right on top of his head.
Yeah.
And I got to the top, and I literally, bro, in my mind, I went, oh shit. And I buried my shit in my chest and held and impacted my head. And I swear he still flashed me.
Yeah.
It still kind of rung my bell a little bit, but just pulling in my head and tucking my chin as hard to my chest saved me from getting knocked out. It sunk the choke even better. I got the tap. But the next 4 days, my neck was sore from absorbing. Not from like whiplash, from absorbing the tear of that impact.
Jesus.
And but it was wild. Yeah. You had these guys signing up that were smoking a half pack of cigarettes and drinking beer, and then all of a sudden they were in the cage getting their ass kicked. Yeah. There were local fights that were settled in the ring. This Kevin Karofsky kid had a rival that was talking shit unnecessarily, right? So Kevin's like, hey man, you think I'm a little bitch wrestler? Just come on and beat my ass then. Let's see what happens. And so dude signed up. It was bad, bro. Yeah. Kevin beat the shit out of this kid. Like, broke teeth, broke his nose. But the dude shook his hand and hugged him, and that was it. Yeah. I doubt they ever had disagreements ever again after that. You know what I mean? So it was a very, very interesting time, but it was a very dangerous time. And the fact that nobody got killed is kind of crazy. It's kind of surprising. Yeah. So we weren't training at the time. This was when I had kind of went rogue and left mom's house. And I'm going through this little odyssey on my own. But at this point in time, I'm starting to compile information. I'd been training for a few years and learning grappling and actually having people to grapple with and study with and practice. And what evaded me was a consistent space to train. Yeah. Like a real space. We were training in literally in little places. Yeah, in my mobile home. Me and Jeremy Morris were grappling in my mobile home on carpet. Yeah. And so it was Blood City all over the place. Yeah. And it annoyed the shit out of me that I didn't have like a 12x12 section of mat because I loved this sport so much. And I couldn't really take it seriously unless I made a serious commitment. So I ended up moving back to Cedar Rapids, got a job at a local telephone company, McLeod USA. Surprised the shit out of myself with my own sales ability because I always thought telemarketing, no fucking way. Right. Also, I'm gonna suck because I can't do that. Well, I was actually pretty good at it. And I made quite a bit of money. I saved quite a bit of money right away. And I remember getting a hold of zebra mats, and I spent something like, I don't know, $1,200 to $1,400 on these mats and put them in the basement. And it was tiny. Like I said, it was like 12 by 14 or something like that. I don't even know. But it wasn't much, but it was game changing. Yeah. To have simply 1 1 1/4 inch mat space to roll. Yep. So this is kind of where, and I'm sure we've left some stuff out, but I think the main thing that we take away is that we were really driven by ourselves.
Yeah.
There was something that drew us to martial arts for different reasons, perhaps.
Right.
You were a born competitor. I knew that when you almost ripped dude's eyeball out.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the time that you almost ripped the dude's eyeball out.
Yeah.
Because that was after Taekwondo, because he kicked him in the face.
Yeah. Well, during Taekwondo.
Yeah, you had to come to terms with somebody. So I mean, I
was always a quiet kid too. I did Taekwondo, but I didn't like confrontation.
You didn't fuck with people.
Yeah, I didn't fuck with them. And there was a kid at the grade above me that would always, our walk home from school would always harass me and my buddy Aaron. And it was one of those things he never physically did anything, but he was there talking shit and he was making shit uncomfortable and
if we fought, I'd beat your ass.
Right. He's one of those guys. He's a one-upper.
Well, when he was a kid, and his family life probably blew.
Right.
But back then, it was just a kid needing to get his ass kicked.
So we dealt with this kid for a couple weeks, and you would come and pick us up, or walk us back
from Harrison.
And I remember we were walking back, and that's when we found out you knew somebody from your high school that was walking with you at that time to pick up her brother, which is the bully.
Right.
The kid.
And this person I was with ended up being the mother of our older brother James' child also.
Yeah.
Our nephew.
Yeah. Yep.
So this person is in some way connected to us, and I haven't seen him. I don't know what happened to him.
I don't know.
You're about to let the people know your first foray into Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, my first blood rage.
Yeah, you saw red. I could see your eyes. You were bugging out.
Yeah, dude. It got to the point. He's bigger than me, but it got to the point where he talked so much shit, and he was trying to show off in front of her sister. I remember him telling, and he even told you. He's like, "I'll fight him. Let's fight."
I was like, "You sure?"
And Keoni's like, "All right, you can do it." And I was silent, man. I didn't say anything, but as soon
as the shit went down.
Soon as we squared up, all I remember is there's a big wooden fence.
Yep.
And a hill. We were on a hill and a big wooden fence right here. And all I remember is
so funny.
All I remember, I can't remember if I kicked him in the head first or
You did. You kicked him in the head immediately.
I kicked him in the head as soon as there wasn't a bell, but as soon as we locked eyes, I kicked him in the head.
Whack.
And then as soon as his head bounced back, I took my fingers like this, like a bowling ball, right?
Yeah.
And I jammed my fingers into his eye sockets.
Yep.
I remember pushing his eyes so far back, I couldn't see his eyeballs.
Right.
And I started smashing his head against
the fence. And I thought that you were gonna. I'm literally looking at it. I'm like, my little brother's gonna tear this fucking kid's eyeballs out.
Yeah. It was that was when I feel like that's when the fighter came out. I said, the bloodthirst.
Fuck you, motherfucker.
Yeah,
that guy. Yeah. You're not gonna bully me.
Yeah.
What are you talking about?
We put up with him for so long. He talked so much shit. And as soon as we squared up, I didn't give him a chance, dude. I kicked him in the face. It was
immediately.
Yeah, it was immediately. I'm like, all right, motherfucker, it's on,
The eyeballs almost came out. So he smashed his head up against the fence. And then he wasn't interested anymore in competition.
He was crying.
He was interested in telling you that he was going to get his friends to beat you up.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That never happened.
I'm going to get my friends to beat you up. And his sister was like, dude, you're such a pussy.
You're a pussy.
Literally.
Yeah.
And that wasn't the only time we had to deal with bullies. So you remember the time that I had to whoop that kid's ass because he came up behind Aaron and smacked him on the head with a stick.
With a stick, yeah.
Yeah. So Aaron is a friend of my brother's, and he was really naturally a lot smaller.
Yeah.
He was a little tiny kid, and just sweetest little kid ever. He wouldn't hurt a fly, and he was really, really nice. And he was walking home, and I see this bully walking behind him with this big stick, whacking him in the head. And I think you were like quite a ways behind him or in front of him or something. And I just lost my fucking shit on this kid. I remember picking him up and launching him into the leaves and chased him home and slammed him up against a door and shit. I was so mad. Like that shit made me so fucking mad.
And he He actually called.
He called the cops.
Yeah.
Yeah, or his parents called the cops or something. And then like we were walking back alleys like losing my flannel and changing my clothes.
Keoni was changing his clothes.
Yeah, we were kind of
every tree. Hold on. Change his clothes. Put his knife in his backpack.
Oh, dude. Yeah. So let's talk about that while we're on the subject. Before we get to hybrid faction, we're kind of leading up to that point where the infamous gym and the mats really make a difference. But I was a totally different person, like to a shameful degree. Mm-hmm. When I think about who I was when I was a teenager and how much angst and dude, I was so fucking angry.
Yeah.
I was this really, I was the quintessential cliche angry white youth that had no reason to be angry, but I was so angry.
Yeah.
And just dark thoughts,
mm-hmm.
Just doing stupid shit, bringing knives to school. I had a whole knife collection. I decided to bring the whole thing to school, even though I was supposed to. There a lot of this is expose, but there was this point when I was going to Jeff,
mm-hmm.
and I skipped like a third of the semester.
Yeah.
Like 30 days, I didn't go to school at all.
Sounds familiar.
Me and my buddy Chris, we just literally fucked around outside of Jefferson High School and like went to McDonald's.
Yeah.
And there was a point in time when we found these old abandoned cars by this big dome. I don't even know what the dome is. It's just some big industrial dome right in the middle of this neighborhood behind Jefferson High School.
Mm-hmm.
You know where the McDonald's is down on First Avenue by Jeff? It's in between that. It's up on kind of this big hill. Mm-hmm. And we would just go chill there. There were times where we would skip school and go up there and climb trees and sit up in the trees.
Just chilling.
And just chill for like 2 or 3 hours and not be at school. And then there's this other time with total dumbasses. We went to Kmart was right across the street at the time. Now it's Rockwell. Kmart's long since gone. But we went into Kmart and we come out of there. We don't really have any money. We're just fucking around or whatever. And Chris pulls out his bag. He's like, "Hey, check this out." He lifted a box of 45 Full Metal Jackets.
Oh shit.
Right? Why?
Right.
We don't have a 45.
Right.
And why would you steal bullets?
Yeah.
What the hell are you gonna do with them now, right?
Right.
Whatever. I throw them in my bag. It's awesome. We've got bullets now, I guess. And oh hey Polar.
Yeah.
Polar's in the house. Our mascot showed up to hang out with us. Polar dog. So we got this. So he's like, "Hey, put these in your bag." So I put these bullets in my bag. We decided to start a small grass fire with oil that we found. Sounds like a good idea.
Yeah.
Right?
Terrible.
So we're like, we get this little bit of oil. I don't know. This is not environmentally friendly, and I'm not proud of this. But we put this little bit of oil on the ground. We light this on fire, and I didn't know this about oil, but once it burns, it doesn't stop burning.
No, it goes.
And whatever it gets on, it also burns. And so we start this, and all of a sudden we get a couple more wind gusts than we're expecting, and this shit is all over the side of this hill.
Yeah.
Like fire.
Right.
And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, as we stomp this out, we're gonna get the fire department's gonna be up here any minute. The cops are we're out in the middle of a residential neighborhood, basically in the middle of the day. How can somebody not see this? Or should we leave? If we leave, is it gonna burn down the whole neighborhood?
Right.
I'm panicking big time, and I'm taking my bag and I'm beating the fuck out of this fire, and I'm stomping on my shoes, and there's oil all over the place, and it's just a disaster.
Yeah.
And I get back to school and I smell like a barbecue. I smell horrible. And I get into class and I'm like I'm shaking. We finally got the fire out. And for how nobody got called, I have no idea. But I finally get back to school and I'm shaking. I'm like, shit, that was too close. That was stupid. And somebody's like, why do you smell like that?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, oh, I went home and we were barbecuing for lunch. But that was the type of shit that I did.
Mm-hmm.
I had no rhyme or reason. I had no direction. I had no hope and no discipline whatsoever. And I think everybody does stupid shit like that, right? And that's not the only dumb shit that I've done. But martial arts changed all of that.
Yeah.
Martial arts put some kind of direction and order in my life, and it almost served as some kind of faith, some kind of confidence instiller that there was something better to come for me, that I would be able to empower myself. So tired of training on carpets and on linoleum and in backyards, I buy these mats. And I can't find very many people to train with me. And people come and go. And Jeremy Morris, who was really consistent with me, his back's kind of messed up and he can't train as much anymore. And so I'm a supervisor for inside sales, and I've got this team, and I start thinking, well, maybe there's somebody here
Fight Club
that can train with me. I've got these mats now. You know, maybe I can convince one of these guys. Enter Devin Christian.
Yeah.
Debo. And Debo starts training with me, and I'm not going to really go too much into that until we get Debo on the show.
Yeah.
But I get these mats in the basement, and before you know it, after all of this kind of piecing things together in different martial arts experiences, this stuff all kind of starts to culminate at Hybrid Faction Combat Club. This is when we got organized. This is when we turned into grinders. This is when 5 people that had different strengths came together and proved that you don't need the best and the best. You need the best will.
Right.
You need the most drive, and you need teammates that give a shit about you.
Yeah.
And that was a really, really, really magical time. There's always going to be something that I hold dear about Hybrid Faction, and because I think it was like the first official team that we put together that was like, it was a real team.
Yeah.
Like everybody there trained their asses off, and they wanted to see each other win. Like when we went out there to fight, and it was us against the world. Like we didn't lose.
Yeah.
You know, we barely ever lost anything that we went out and competed at Hybrid Faction, but if we did lose, we all lost together. It hurt.
Yeah,
like we went out there and we were completely committed.
Man. It was 5 guys.
Yeah, and give or take a couple here,
we did here and there.
Those were the core guys, though.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so Devin started training with me. Then you came that day.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bo. And then Jesse.
Yeah.
And that was about
it.
That
was the core.
And Jesse was the only guy that came that didn't know any of us. Bo knew us from work. Bo worked with worked with me at McLeod USA. You already had a black belt in Taekwondo. And, we had all these skill sets. But Jesse was a friend or an acquaintance of somebody that I knew at work at McLeod. And this guy's like, hey, I know this guy Jesse, and he wants to, he's boxed and he wants to come train with you guys. But the thing, I've heard that, at that point in time in our training, I've heard this now.
Right.
I've heard people starting to say, oh, my buddy wants, and as well as I know, that's out of 10 people, that's true one time maybe.
Yeah.
And, but then he told me again, he's like, no, my buddy Jesse really wants to come. Can I give him your number? I'm like, yeah, cool. So I get a hold of Jesse. He asked me if he can come, and he comes over, and he was the only guy that actually sought us out. And Jesse will be able to tell his own story, but he relayed to me when he first came in. And this was years after we had trained together, and he had moved to Davenport at this point. But he said when he came in the first day, he was really high on his own supply. He was really sure of himself. He was kind of going, these guys in the basement, who the fuck do these guys think they are? Like, I'm going to smash all these guys.
Right.
Because Jesse was a very capable person. Jesse was a really good wrestler, and he was just fucking monster. He was so strong.
Solid.
Yeah, super solid. Powerful. And he came in, and he kind of threw people around. He was the best wrestler in the room. And when I found out that, and I felt that myself, I was like, hey, you're the wrestling coach now.
Yeah.
Because all I know is a shitty single, shitty double. And but he got caught a few times right away. I knew even though he got caught, I was like, it don't matter. This guy's gonna be a fucking monster.
Yeah.
If he's this hard to catch now, if he learns a couple things, he'll be legit.
Yeah.
But he came back to me later, like a year later, and told me that he almost never came back.
Really?
He said he walked out of there and he almost convinced himself 100% that this was not for him and it wasn't his thing. And he was like, ego checked.
Yeah.
He got ego checked.
Yeah.
And the male ego is a hilarious thing sometimes, especially when you think you're the hottest shit in the world and you've like talked yourself up, and then somebody's like, no, you're nothing to me.
Right.
You're a peon to me. I'll smash you.
Yeah.
Well, nobody did that to Jesse that night, but he did get caught a few times, and that alone made him almost never come back. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
Like that's a significant part of his life and his accomplishment, and he almost, because of some insecurity of the time or some ego thing at the time, potentially would have missed out on this opportunity to express himself and be an awesome teammate. It was little tiny things like that. We talked about that in our last podcast. Little decisions like Jesse going, nope, I'm coming back.
Right.
And
It's
then
big.
and then it clicks the very next time. But how many people never do it? They never try. They never put themselves out on a line like that.
Mm-hmm.
And how many do it and then quit when it gets tough?
Right.
Like when it gets really tough.
Yeah.
When it's not so easy anymore, and you hit a plateau and you have to stick around, or you got your blue belt and there's still white belts that beat you up every once in a while.
Yeah.
Are you going to stick around? Like that's the true martial artist. And I used to get annoyed when people would quit, but now I'm like, you know what? If it's not important enough for you to stick with it,
Mm-hmm.
and you've gotten out of it what you need to be the best person that you can be, fine.
Yeah.
But if that's the case, be honest with yourself about that case. Don't bullshit yourself and go, well, it's just not for me, when you're just kind of being a little chump. Mm-hmm. And you need to break through that plateau, and you need to persevere, and so on and so forth. But we're going to talk about the hybrid faction when we get some of these guests on. I want to get Bo on here. Mm-hmm. I want to get Devin on here because the hybrid faction was gangster as hell.
Yeah.
People came in there expecting to do something and left thinking a whole different thing about their own capability in life.
When we had that group, everybody had a job, and we still
yeah.
trained every day, 2 hours.
I put in more time. That was such a huge. I remember there was one time you and I kept track.
Yeah.
And we trained for like 60 days straight. There was a period of like 2 months where we didn't have, and when I say 60 days, just so that the people know, I'm not talking about 60 days doing a workout.
Yeah.
I'm talking about 60 days like, what would we do? Striking with takedowns.
Yeah.
Striking with takedowns. Basically MMA.
Yeah.
We were sparring. We were grappling. We were doing heavy shit every single day for hours.
Yeah.
For 2 hours a night. I got home at 9 p.m. because I worked second shift. That was when everybody showed up. Luckily, most of the guys worked with me, so they did the same.
Right.
And then Dad would bring you over
Yep.
at 9 o'clock, and Jesse was at that point in time capable of getting over there because I think he was doing schooling for his career.
Yeah.
And there would also be times where you guys would come over at 9. Jesse couldn't make it, and he'd show up at like 10:30.
Yeah.
And so I'd be training with you guys for 90 minutes, and Jesse would show up and he'd go, "Hey, dude, like I don't expect you to train.
Right.
So if you don't want to, but if you still want to get some in, I'll get some in."
Come on,
let's go.
Come on in.
We would train so much, and a lot of times you guys would just stick around.
Yeah.
That's the way it was, and we trained for hours and hours and hours. And I would say that in terms of combat, in terms of our ability to fight, and to bring a fight to a motherfucker and beat somebody's ass, it was all that. The bulk of where I got that, and where I feel like all of us got that, was in that basement.
For sure.
That basement was so gangster,
I agree.
dude. There were people that I worked with that would come in, and these were the false prophets. These were the guys with bravados. They were like, "Oh, I'm so tough," and the guys with attitude, and the guys that were street, and all this bullshit that they would talk. And they would come in and trying to be hard and going, "Oh, I train for the streets," and they just get their asses kicked. They'd get and they would leave with their tails between their legs. And then we had Smokey come in, and we'll tell the story of Smokey without telling Smokey's name. But Smokey left a flannel at our basement, and he came in, and Smokey was the gang leader of a group of high school nerds that boxed in their backyard. Well, Smokey was he was a wrestler.
Yeah.
And decent enough wrestler to clinch people up and put them in the corner and beat them up when they didn't know what they were doing. And when Smokey came over here, he thought he was going to do some shit.
He got fucking worked.
And he got his ass whooped. He got his ass whooped by a 16-year-old kid that triangled him, beat him up, kicked him in the face. Smokey left his smoky flannel in our basement, and it stunk so bad. It stunk up the whole basement. So he comes back like, 2 weeks later? Because we convinced him to come get his flannel. And we tell the story of what happened when he returned to get his flannel.
We conned him into training again.
Why don't you just train again? You're here?
Yeah.
Rah, rah, rah.
And he had to,
Because we called him out.
And he got fucked up again.
Yeah.
I mean,
so,
it is what it is. He got fucked up, and I'm not a fan of this guy to this day. But
yeah, I don't think this guy's a fan of this guy.
Yeah.
But the first time I remember it distinctly because the first time was grappling, and he got smoked. Yeah. You triangled him 6 ways to Sunday. Everybody else had their way with him because they were better.
Yeah.
And he was a decent wrestler, but he was completely unprepared for what we were bringing on the ground. Yeah. I was thinking about this at the point the other day with the way we trained, you and I specifically, at the time, and at that history point in MMA, even though we were training in a basement and we didn't have any official trainers, I think your active guard was one of the best guards in all of MMA.
Yeah.
And
that was my game.
It was. People would try to hit you and they'd end up in triangles immediately.
Yeah.
But anyways, you smoked this dude on the ground, and then when he came back, it was striking night.
Yeah.
And that was his forte.
Right.
Quote unquote. That was what he did.
Well,
right?
and we humored him because we asked him. We were like, "Oh, you're a boxer, so show us." And as he's showing us, I'm like, "Dude, this guy don't know fucking anything."
Nah, bro.
And we're self-taught, but I'm like,
bro.
dude. And sure enough, when we spar, gets your ass whooped.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, we're self-taught, but we're self-taught with an open mind, and we're looking at all these different sources and going, look, I've studied 3 different styles, and I can tell what works. I was watching boxing my whole life.
Yeah.
I loved combat sports. It wasn't like I wasn't watching boxing.
Right.
And so this guy comes in, he starts showing this really rudimentary shit, and we're like, meh.
Nah.
So I watch him spar you and everybody else, and he gets embarrassed.
Yeah.
He got kicked in the head. He got fucking worked over. We don't see this guy for 2 years. No, more than that. It was years and years and years and years. But
2 or 3.
He came in, and he came in a total local hero and got chewed up and spit out, and he wasn't the only one.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that came in here talking that talk, leaving with their tails between their legs.
Yeah.
And we quickly developed a reputation, and at the point in time, I didn't know how good we were. Yeah. I had no frame of reference. I was still, and I think all of us to a point were like, hey, we're self-taught. Mm-hmm. And that might have put us out there in the cage when we did compete with this, this hunger. Like, I'm almost an animal, but we were super, super good. Yeah. We just didn't really know how good we were until we started cross-training with people, and then we were like, oh, shit. But it's important for people to know that this whole thing went from us not having any capacity to know what could have happened to us literally forging our own future. At this point in time, we had not been classically trained in anything with the exception of you being classically trained in Taekwondo. Mm-hmm. When Hybrid Faction started up, everything at that point in time that I was bringing to the table was self-taught. It was stuff that I'd collected. And while I don't know anything compared to what I know now, I knew quite a bit. Yeah. And I knew enough that I could tell you guys and teach you guys, and then you guys could go out and search for more information.
We questioned ourselves too much because when we started competing, that's when we realized we knew what we were doing.
Yeah, and we lived it. We had a level of confidence because we had a level of preparedness. If you do this shit all day with every free amount of your available time, you develop confidence because it becomes ingrained in your being, right? And that's the way it was with us. There were times when I remember we were training in that place, and I could feel myself getting sick. Yeah. I could feel that my immune system was so beat down from training so that I was like, well, I'm gonna get sick tomorrow because I trained too hard tonight. Like, I got to the end of my rope, but part of that was just a testament to how badass those guys were and how much we pushed each other. We had sometimes we had 6 guys in there, but usually 5 guys pushing for 2.5 hours, and there was no breaks. Yeah. It was like, okay, we're going again, another 30 minutes, and it was wild shit. And we're not even into Valhalla yet. Right. So, but the point is this: when I was a kid, I used to get these motivational speakers. Mm-hmm. They'd come into Jeff, they probably did Wash and everywhere else. And you listen to them, and they sound good and everything. But when I was a kid and insecure, I was like, that's not real. Yeah. Or that's not typical, Right. I had all these really dark thoughts about I'm just going to be mediocre. That was my biggest fear. Yeah. That I was going to get a job and I was going to be somebody's bitch, basically. Yeah. And I'm not trying to disrespect people, but like I can't identify with.
It's not personality-wise.
I can't identify with not forging your own path or trying to envelop yourself in some passion of yours. Right. So the idea of working for something, it really didn't sit well with me, but I really feared it. I thought that would maybe be my destiny or military or something. Mm-hmm. And martial arts, through nothing but self-teaching and passion for something, suddenly now puts us in a position where we're attracting each other to other people, other like-minded people. Yeah. And those passions are kind of coalescing and building momentum. They're feeding off of each other. And up to this point, we had absolutely no help. And after this point, we didn't have any help for a long time. Yeah. It would only be years later when you would go to Milwaukee where we would have our first contact with an actual professional coach. We did some cross-training with Pat Militich, in the hybrid faction days, which we'll talk about, but it wasn't like consistent. It was just it was spattering here and there.
Yeah.
So up until you had what, 10, 12 wins, something like that. I don't remember how much you had when you moved to Dukes.
9.
9-0. You're for 9-0 in fights, in professional fights, and you hadn't had in MMA or jiu-jitsu or anything. You finished most of your shit with jiu-jitsu. You hadn't had any official coaching.
Right.
You hadn't had any black belts that were tutoring you. It was just the shit we did in that basement. That blows my mind now when I think about it, because these motivational speakers used to say all the time, look, man, if you're passionate about something and you chase it,
you'll do it.
And after 20 years, it'll happen.
Yeah.
Like, you'll start to build enough momentum that it can't not happen unless you like really go out of your way to fuck over your own life.
Right.
And so we just kind of ran with that. We took an opportunity, and I think about some similar comparison, and I can't think of any. That's why I think that our gym's pretty special, more special than I give it credit for, because imagine somebody going, you know what? I'm going to decide to be a professional fighter, and I'm going to teach myself all the skills because there's no teacher. Like,
yeah.
A part of me is like, what the hell did you even attempt this thing for?
Right.
But I really didn't attempt anything. I just started training in martial arts, and then other people who wanted to fight and compete, they started training with me. And before I knew it, Debo was taking a fight.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, coach, I'm going to Des Moines to fight this old dude named Ronnie Britt.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. He's like, Bo's with me, don't worry, I'll be good. I'm like, dude, what? Like, I was your coach. Like, you can't just make this call without asking me. But it was a wild time, and the things that we had to go through just to get to hybrid faction were insane.
Yeah.
And
lifetime.
If we weren't obsessed to a almost an unhealthy degree with fighting and combat and war and martial arts, we would have never stuck through it. We would have never stuck through it long enough to go get those zebra mats, let alone a year or two later when we went to Minnesota and got even more zebra mats to increase our training space to like 18 feet instead of 12.
Yep.
So,
I remember that.
it was just passion. It was all passion. So that the point, I guess, for me that I want to illustrate to people that are listening to this is a testament to the power of faith and passion and perseverance. If you want something and you're that passionate about it, you can go online, you can go to the library, you can start studying, you can obsessively study, you can get mentors that will speed up your studying. And someday, in 10 to 15 years, you'll be able to make money, or at least have some kind of revenue stream, for no other reason that you're as experienced as you are in any given subject.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you chase your dream?
Right.
Why would you settle and go, well, this is a good job. Well, this is a nice career. Mom, I said this in our last podcast. We're so fortunate that we had a mom that said, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't, at a young age, my mom said, be poor and super happy before you be rich and super sad. And I know a lot of people that are very wealthy and unhappy. And I know some people that are wealthy and very happy. And I think if I was more wealthy right now, I'd be a lot more happy.
Yeah.
No, it's not true. I'm happy as fuck. But, it's true. Like, I would rather scrape by and love my life than be 100%. Incredibly rich and just be like, ugh, all the time.
Yep.
In that, I'm really proud, not only of you and I, but of our entire team and the people that our listeners are going to talk to, and some of the stories and the characters like Bagney and Bo and Brent and all these guys, to meet these guys, because the hard drive story is pretty incredible, and it's a testament to will and cooperation.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for cooperation, like I'm now at a point where I can take credit for making sure that this idea moved forward. And that I never let go of it, and I kept it moving, and I know that I have an important part of this, but if there wasn't people there, it wouldn't matter anyway.
Right.
And if there wasn't people there, we would have never gotten as far as we did. So we were looking forward. I think me and my brother are looking forward to bringing you guys some of the personalities. We're characters ourselves, but you guys haven't really heard anything until you hear some of these cats. These are some of the best in the world. They're hilarious. And the cool thing is they're going to corroborate the madness of hybrid faction, of Valhalla, of our own gym in Lamont, Valhalla MMA.
Yep.
Some of the shit you and I did there, it was bonkers.
Well, I mean, just how many gyms we've gone, it's been a lifetime, man.
And how many have we seen the competitors or whatever come and go and
Yeah.
come and go.
Yep.
There's people that consider themselves our competitors right now, that we were training for 15 or 20 years, or 15 years at least in some form of martial art before they even knew what martial arts were. I'm like, bro, like I'm not paying attention to you. Like we've had 3 or 4 schools that have claimed to be competitors, and that stuff come and goes. I'm competing with myself at this point in time.
Yeah.
Our legacies are defined by how much we push ourselves, not anybody else.
Yeah.
And it's been a trip to watch this whole thing, because in the very beginning, MMA it was brutal, and it was unregulated, and it was the Wild West. And I don't know what you think, but we'll get an opportunity to go into all of our different gyms in our next podcast. But I think that the big turning point for MMA was Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner.
Yeah.
I think that fight, the Ultimate Fighter finale, when people were calling people on the phone and going, dude, you got to turn on this fight right now, it's crazy.
Yep.
That was when MMA was like completely thrust into the mainstream. And that was when I noticed that, prior it was kind of this underground thing that we really liked, and we felt like we were a part of this community, because we were. There was like 10,000, 15,000 people across the country keeping this sport alive because it was in blackout, and we were some of those people. But when that fight took place, that was when I was like, okay, here comes big money, here comes big exposure. The sport is finally going to get its due, and people are going to ruin it probably. To some degree, they're going to ruin it.
Anything someone
and it was because money, right? It's because we saw
right.
boxing get corrupted with money, and we knew that the injection of money would make it kind of a circus sideshow instead of this awesome underground thing that we
right.
And I still love MMA to death, but there was definitely something special about it back then, before the mainstream took a hold of it, and all the nerds at the bar were like, "I know what I'd do if I was
fighting." They're talking about now.
They're lucky I got hurt when I was playing ball, or I'd be in there kicking everybody."
Yep.
Yeah. So, guys, thanks for listening. We are going to wrap it tonight, telling you guys how we kind of came up in this business. We haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg, really. Hybrid Faction is where Hybrid Faction is really where the story starts.
Well, and even from my side of the story, like, with Taekwondo going into, that was my transition into Hybrid Faction. So we'll talk more about Hybrid Faction, and then, then it gets even crazier. It goes into Valhalla's.
Valhalla's where shit.
There's just a lot of shit went down, man.
Yeah.
So
it's a saga.
It'll be, yeah.
What we've talked to you about today is fairly tame.
Yeah. Compared to what
we were kids.
Yeah, it gets crazy.
We were kids when we grew into adults, and we decided to train with no pads on the walls and concrete and bloody knuckles and cut Achilles tendons and shit. Training in the grass and training in the chicken shack and on linoleum and in trailers, that's crazy enough. But the intensity of Hybrid Faction and of the Armory and all of these places was crazy. And I think there's a lot of professional mixed martial artists now that couldn't hack that kind of shit. And would go, that shit ain't for me. And if they were to have come into the sport when it wasn't like highly specialized training and a lot of skill work, but it was like that kind of environment, a lot of people can't handle that shit. No. And there were a lot of people, and we'll talk about that with, Valhalla and Hybrid, the attrition rate, the amount of dudes that say they want to fight until it's time to do what fighters actually do. And man, that we're going to do a whole episode on the phonies at some point in time, because
a lot of them.
There's some gold shit in there.
Yeah.
But we've brought you up to the point in our MMA journey where we are now forming a team called Hybrid Faction Combat Club. This is where professional mixed martial arts for the people within our group officially began, and our most intensive training and our steepest learning curve took place. Hybrid Faction was on Wilson Avenue Drive in my basement, and it was a tiny little spot, but 5 brothers got together and built a team that eventually became a legacy that we built our current gym behind as well. We're also going to talk about collaboration and joining forces with a guy that I had known in the beginning, Dave Scherzer, that I'd met at the Blairstown Brawls. And Dave is the guy that named Hard Drive Performance Center under Hard Drive, Team Hard Drive. And we collaborated and joined forces with him in Hybrid Faction. And we'll talk about how we did join forces, why we joined forces, why it was an easy choice. And we're going to go into the history of Hybrid. My hope is that I can get a hold of some of these cats. They're busy. Devin is now a total
fish nerd.
He's a star fisherman. His shit kills all my shit. My social media presence sucks in his wake.
Yeah.
He's killing the fish game.
Yeah, he is, man.
And that's awesome. I'm super happy for him, but I know he'll get on this podcast and he'll make time to come talk about some of this crazy shit. Jesse's still in the gym. Jesse's coaching his son in Hard Drive Wrestling Club, which is awesome. To be able to have these guys still in our life, Bo still on the mat, you coaching with me coaching there, and everybody still, for the most part, except for D-Bone, he's on the lake, so it's all good. But he still gets in and he still touches base, and to have that brotherhood and still have these guys around is a real treat. All the years later, because back in that basement, that's when we started talking about this.
Yep.
In that basement, that's when I was like, guys, we need to.
That's when ideas started.
We need to actually have a gym. There's no gym here. We need to create a place where people like us don't have to take this long ass brutal trip, guys. Because listeners, listen, we didn't have coaches making this learning curve great where we didn't have to make mistakes. We were in a combat sport that we were figuring out on our own. So, I wanted to build a world-class facility for us so we could all become old men someday and train and talk shit to all the new fighters and have a great time. But give Cedar Rapids the gym that it really deserved. Yeah. And this is when this idea was kind of born, where we were like, hey man, from the depths, we're going to come from the basement. We're going to go from the basement to the mountaintop. You know what I mean? And that's kind of when the belief in the idea and the faith of a real gym and a team was kind of born. So I'm stoked to talk about that. I want to get Bo here. I want to get you here. Hopefully we can get some more mics and do a 4-way.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
And get the whole team here, because these guys can corroborate this story, and I want to make sure that this story is kept well, and I'll have pictures and everything.
For sure.
This might take a while because I'm gonna have to edit some cool shit in. Yeah. Like the Dragon Zord flute. Yeah. But hopefully our next episode we can go into hybrid faction. And we're going to continue in this Odyssey. Like Eric said, we had like 6 or 7 gyms that we moved to and for from, and every one of them had their own personal little
special
era
thing. Yeah.
Up to and including Valhalla's basement.
Yeah.
In the ice tub. So guys, thanks for listening. We don't want to take up too much of your time. We appreciate you guys checking out episode 2, and you've learned a little bit about our journey. You're going to go through our entire journey. We're going to tell the whole story about MMA. Get that out of your way. That'll give you a clear perspective of where me and Eric are coming from, and then we can talk about the aliens and all the cool shit that we're really interested in after that. So, brother, any closing thoughts?
No. I just, like I said, I kind of let Keoni take the wheel on this one. Like I said,
and let's say why, because you're tired of shit right now.
No, I'm tired of shit. I'm dealing with personal shit too. But
you haven't slept. He hasn't slept in like 3 days.
Like
so
3 days. It's been
times.
like 3 days. I feel like I'm an Army Ranger right now, like training.
I remember when we did kicks and taekwondo.
No, I'm super tired. You can probably tell by my yawning. But no, not only that. My story was I did taekwondo for such a long time, and then I branched over into hybrid faction, and it'll be cooler when we get these guys here. That way, like Keoni said, it can be more of an accurate pool.
And there was this time, that I was training kind of on my own with all these different people. So I had to tell that, and I had to honor those people because they were my training partners at one point too. But the real training, the real team was hybrid faction. Yeah. And when we go into that, that's when kind of our MMA story actually starts. All my credit in martial arts up to that point goes to Bruce Lee. Yeah. I think Bruce Lee is the first mixed martial artist, the forefather of mixed martial arts. A lot of other mixed martial artists, high-level people, goats, they agree the same. But that was the philosophy that kind of was the precursor to it. And that's the philosophy that I had adhered to. When you came in with Taekwondo, you had a lot of attributes already built in. You were the kicker. Yeah. You were the one to teach kicks and range, and you still are popping at range. Mm-hmm. But that was when we had to congeal everything together. We had to give everybody ground games. Everybody had to learn some degree of wrestling and the clinch. That was where that shit was our bread and butter. Yep. Clinching and grinding people to dust. Mm-hmm. So we'll talk more about that. But guys, thanks for hanging out with us for a while, brother. I appreciate it. Even though you're tired, next time we'll get more sleep.
Hey,
and we'll kill it.
I'm gonna be wired next time. Get a bang. I'll be good.
Yeah. All right. Cool, brother. I appreciate it. Thank you, guys. Thanks for sticking with us, and we'll see you for episode 3. This podcast is made possible by Gail and Douglas Koch and the family hard drive. Music courtesy of Mike Chino.